This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
On Wednesday, the Supreme Court heard arguments in a closely watched case that challenges Arizona's notorious anti-immigrant law. The case could have implications for a half-dozen other states that passed similar measures, which are now on hold pending the outcome of the court's decision. The Obama administration has challenged 4 provisions of the law, known as Senate Bill 1070, for interfering with federal immigration enforcement. Most of the hearing concerned the part of the law requiring state officials to check immigration status. Based on their line of questioning, justices across the ideological spectrum appeared reluctant to strike down the provision. Even Justice Sonia Sotomayor appeared to agree that states were entitled to enact such provisions. The justices seemed more divided, however, over 3 other provisions of the law, including one that makes it a crime for undocumented immigrants to work. After listening to the oral arguments, Republican Governor Jan Brewer of Arizona said the justices seemed to side with her decision to sign Senate Bill 1070 into law.
I'm very, very encouraged from what we all were able to view today and hear. I thought that the hearing went very, very, very well. I feel very confident as I walked out of there that we will get a favorable ruling in late June. I'm very, very impressed with the fact that they gave us extra time, something that we all know is very unusual, and that gave the significance of how important this ruling will be, not only to the state of Arizona, but certainly to the United States of America.
That was Republican Governor Jan Brewer of Arizona. The Supreme Court's ruling on Senate Bill 1070 is expected in June. Many legal analysts expect it will uphold parts of the law and strike down others. Should the court uphold any part of the law, civil rights groups plan to challenge it from a different angle, that it discriminates on the basis of race and ethnic background. Meanwhile, immigrant rights activists held a number of protests and vigils across the country to coincide with yesterday's hearing. In Phoenix, Arizona, hundreds of protesters blocked the entranceway to the Immigration Customs and Enforcement, or ICE, office.
This is the only way that we can get the government and the public to see what we want.
I believe affronts on human rights are something that affect us all, and I'm standing up for dignity and respect for all people.
At least 9 people were arrested at the protest as they locked themselves down in the street in front of the immigration building and furled a banner that read, "ICE, stop deporting Arpaio's victims, not one more. No SB 1070, no ESCOM, no Arpaio." That's a reference to Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who the Justice Department has accused of committing flagrant civil rights abuses against immigrants and people of color in Arizona. For more, we're joined by 2 people. Seth Wessler, award-winning reporter for Colorlines.com. He was in the Supreme Court yesterday covering the SB 1070 hearing, senior researcher at Applied Research Center. And in Phoenix, Arizona, we're joined by Randy Parraz. He's president of Citizens for a Better Arizona, the group that led a successful recall effort against State Senator Russell Pierce, the leading lawmaker behind SB 1070. Their sights are now set on Sheriff Arpaio, who faces re-election this fall. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Seth Wessler, tell us about what happened at the Supreme Court yesterday.
Well, it was a packed court yesterday, and the reality is that the government's attorney left the court rather bruised yesterday. The justices, the 8 of them that were there, Justice Kagan recused herself, asked a rather aggressive line of questions to Donald Verrilli, the government's attorney. Basically, the argument here is that the government says that Arizona and other states can't try to pass their own immigration laws, that the government has the power to do that. And Arizona replies that they're just trying to help the federal government do its job. What happened in court is that the justices seemed to buy Arizona's argument. Essentially, Justice Roberts said, you know, you can still make the decision. You, the federal government, still get to make the decision about who gets deported. This is still in your hands. And Verrilli, the counsel for the government, responded, but we haven't authorized Arizona to act in this way. The reality is that the government is actually walking a pretty fine line. The federal government has rapidly expanded a set of programs that use local police to detain and deport non-citizens, Secure Communities and the 287G program. And the state of Arizona is arguing that they're not doing anything that those programs don't do. Even Justice Sotomayor, who was clearly the most sympathetic with the government's claims, said that she found the government's argument that somehow SB 1070 and Secure Communities and 287G are different. She found that argument, quote, terribly confusing, and asked Verrilli to come up with a different argument. It was as if she was trying to pull something out of him that that he wasn't ready to offer. The reality is that the government was unwilling to go into that other argument, which is that this law causes racial profiling, and the federal government, took this suit as a preemption suit and refused to address the racial profiling issues. It was very clear that everybody in the courtroom recognized that that's one of the major issues at play here, and in avoiding it, the federal government seemed to set themselves up for this kind of pushback.
In other words, they basically saw it as a jurisdictional issue of who has the authority or the constitutional responsibility for the laws, rather than actually looking at the substance of how the law is affecting the people of Arizona.
That's right.
What about the other arguments that the government, because it challenged the law on a variety of issues? Did he get into the other arguments as well?
Well, I mean, the basic argument here is about the power of the states, right? And so the government was challenging a set of provisions in the law. The provision the sort of show me your papers provision that requires local police to ask people for their immigration status, a provision of the law that allows police to arrest undocumented immigrants without a warrant, a section of the law that makes it illegal for undocumented immigrants to work. And on all of these grounds, the federal government's argument was that that they have the power and the state does not to implement these bills. That was the basis of their argument, and the court was not buying it.
Randy Parraz, while Seth Wessler was inside observing the Supreme Court proceedings, you were outside with the major protests, and then you flew overnight to Phoenix, where there were also protests, where we're speaking to you from. Your concern as president of Citizens for a Better Arizona?
I mean, I think especially being on the outside on the steps of the Supreme Court, it just seemed like there's just two Americas. You had one particular protest and rally, which was predominantly all white, a much older crowd of folks speaking out there in support of SB 1070. And you had the present and future of America, which was a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multilingual group of folks, ecumenical folks who came together in opposition to SB 1070. So basically, this is a fight over the future of America. This is about, are you going to have one set of rules that apply if you live in California, New York, or another set of rules that apply when you live in New Mexico or Arizona? It's about, really trying to see what's going to be the test for folks when we talk about, we're going to provide a pathway for young people to be educated and to apply their skills and not be penalized for the behavior of their parents. Or are we going to have just this different status of citizenship based on where you live in the United States of America? We're supposed to be one country. So I think you see this fight playing out. When Jan Brewer signed that law, she wasn't really interested in, securing the border or trying to be a leader in fighting this immigration issue. She was trying to get elected to maintain a position as governor. And the moment she signed that, all 3 or 4 of her other challengers in her primary dropped off. And so that's why Russell Pierce is so much credited for getting Jan Brewer reelected to be governor. So, I mean, the bottom line, they don't really understand the extent to which this law goes deeper and really impacts the lives of people who are living here, not just those who are undocumented, but those who have been here for 3 or 4 generations who are of Latino background, who are being stopped and harassed and detained. And I think we shouldn't be surprised that the Supreme Court was not willing to deal with those types of issues at this time. This is a very political issue.
And Randy, the impact still in Arizona to today of the law, even though portions of it have been held up pending the decision of the court?
Yeah, I mean, people understand that there was racial profiling taking place here in Arizona prior to this law being signed. What just totally struck all of us is that then we had the signing and passage of this law, pretty much made it legal, codified it, and said, yeah, you can do that. You can act on your reasonable suspicions, no matter how you've been raised or how you've been trained. And if you think someone looks a certain way, then albeit, yeah, detain them, stop them. They don't have their papers, then bring them in. That's what this is really about. It's about a time with the largest, fastest growing voter constituency group demographic in the state now is Latino. It's the fastest, and so it's about power. It's about what's going to happen in this particular state when it comes to who's going to be our representative. So there's much more than just, why is this particular attack happening now? Why didn't it happen in 2002 or 2004? Right? There's certain things that are happening now that are this convergence that really allowed this type of attack to happen. And it's unfortunate that we had to turn to the Supreme Court to intervene. But what's even worse is that we have a Congress that's much more representative of America than the Supreme Court. Sure, they should be taking the action necessary to make sure we have some sort of uniformity of laws, especially when it comes to immigration. This is not the United Counties of Arizona. We are not a country, right? This immigration impacts international law, international borders. And so for us to sit back and say, oh, states' rights, are you kidding me? Every state can do what they want on this particular issue. Oh, so if states want to go back and start having racial covenants when it comes to housing, or, hey, this is so segregate certain things, it's not just about, state rights have a limit. And so I think now that for them to put it out there again, it's like, it's just a throwback now to the 50s, and when some states thought it was okay that have, allow certain people to vote and not others, or allow certain gender to vote and not others, or to have people go to school in certain places. So this is basically about having a country that's united in terms of its policy when it comes to how we deal with immigrants, right? And not to have, if you're undocumented, say, oh, I'm going to go move to California because they actually will allow me to go to school. Or I'm going to go to another state, or New York, or different places. And surely we don't want policies coming up based because, oh, there's a Democrat majority in California, but there's a Republican majority in Arizona, so therefore we can have different laws because that's what they want in that particular state. I mean, surely we need to have more courageous leadership coming up from the president, from Congress, and from the Supreme Court to kind of put some sanity into this debate.
And Randy, you've initiated a campaign like you did against Russell Pierce, now against Joe Arpaio. The importance of that campaign and the role of Joe Arpaio in this debate on immigration?
Yeah, it's basically to show these elected officials that there is consequences to your behavior. Now, Russell Pierce, if SB 1070 is so popular in Arizona, why did he get recalled? Why in a very conservative district did 42 out of 51 precincts vote to recall Russell Pierce? The first time in the history of the United States that a sitting president was so extreme that he actually got recalled after only serving one year of his 2-year term. So I think we need to really look at that. What we're trying to show America is that Arizona is not a Tea Party state. There is a Tea Party minority. But when good people, whether they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, stay quiet, complain on the sidelines, and don't get involved, you have this really extreme right-wing tilt of your politics. And so I think, now our next step is to really hold Sheriff Arpaio accountable. We're going to remove him from office. He's been there now 20 years. He's going to be 80 years old in June. It's time for him to go. He's a relic from the past, and his policies and the abusiveness that he's done does not reflect the values of most people in Maricopa. I've been meeting with Republicans and Democrats, and they're all saying it's time for him to go. It's an embarrassment. And now he's using our taxpayer dollars to go to promote issues like birther bills or birther policies. He's going to expose an investigation on President Obama's birth certificate. My God, he's not in charge of that. He's in charge of law enforcement in Maricopa County. So I think, as we move forward, that's going to be the emphasis. We're going to be reaching out to voters and educating them in terms of, how far. Sheriff Arpaio is our responsibility. We got to take care of that problem now. We're not looking to the Supreme Court to save Arizona. We're not looking for the president to save Arizona. We, from the ground up, are going to be moving things into action and engaging voters so we can really take care of the problems that's happened here within our state.
Seth Freed Wessler, you were also just recently in Arizona, but you say it's the Obama pipeline, deportation pipeline, that keeps pumping despite this Brewer bill.
That's right. I mean, the question on the table in the court yesterday was what the states are allowed to do. But the question that lots of people have on the ground is what's Obama going to do? What is this administration going to do? The administration has deported more people than ever before, 400,000 people. I was just in Nogales, Sonora, just over the border from Arizona, and I met dozens of people who had been picked up, detained, and deported as a result of Obama's policies all over the country. These are people who were stopped for driving without a license. This is the kind of immigration policy that the federal government is.
We want to thank you for being with us, Seth Wessler and Randy Parraz. Thanks for joining us. That does it for the show. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke.